Fall camp begins for Michigan football this week, and we will have an extensive preview next on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Yes, caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it and a touchdown night again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Michael Spath, my partner from WolverineDigest.com and from WTKA in Ann Arbor, will be offering his thoughts a little bit later on, but we begin with mine as fall camp begins for the Michigan Wolverines on Friday. And for the rest of the Big Ten as well, and most of college football. A couple of those teams that are playing in what's called Week 0 this year, Florida, Miami, Arizona, and Hawaii, they started camp last week. Everybody else begins on Friday. Here are the top players and storylines, 5 apiece, that I'm going to be watching and looking for throughout fall camp. Let's start with the 5 players. We're going to start with Zach Charbonnet, the outstanding tailback from out in California, early enrollee. He is the highest rated running back recruit that Michigan has signed since Jim Harbaugh arrived in Ann Arbor. Now, over the years, however, Michigan's not had a lot of great luck with highly rated tailback recruits, but this young man's film is filthy. Unfortunately, he was overcoming a knee injury, not ligament related. There's some talk maybe it was like a meniscus tear. He was rehabbing that even though he enrolled early, so he didn't play at all in the spring. Harbaugh raved about him and his conditioning work, though, and dedication in the weight room at Big Ten Football Media Days in Chicago last week. And let's face it, there are certainly carries available in the Michigan backfield. That position is the only question mark, really, Michigan has on the offense heading into this season. The next player I'm going to be watching during fall camp, safety Brad Hawkins, getting a lot of run from fellow players this offseason as a player that has really emerged at the safety position. And I think that's the best case scenario for Michigan if he can pull that off. I know everybody has the freshman Daxton Hill penciled in there. We'll have more on him in a moment. I know everybody does, but I think the best scenario for Michigan is if you've got an experienced upperclassman who is really a high-quality athlete. If he's able to play that position regularly, where you can then situationally use Daxton Hill's speed all over the field, nickel, slot corner, things of that nature. So is the hype surrounding Brad Hawkins for real? We'll find out when camp begins on Friday. The next player I'm going to be watching during fall camp, the aforementioned Daxton Hill, the highest rated safety recruit that Michigan has signed since the modern recruiting rankings era began back in 2010. 2002, a consensus 5-star. Nick Saban said that he thought Daxton Hill was the best safety prospect he's ever seen coming out of high school, but he didn't enroll early. So how ready is he? Now, you don't need too much ready when you can run as fast and jump as high as he can. This is a world-class level athlete. But I think it would be, as I just said a minute ago, the best case scenario for Michigan is if you had a junior, and a fourth-year junior in Brad Hawkins, able to step in and handle a lot of the mental aspects of the job because he's got an experience advantage. And that permitted you, hey, if you've got teams moving their fastest receivers into the slot, you move Daxton Hill down there so that situationally you can take advantage of his flexibility in the number one area that he brings to the table, and that's going to be man-to-man coverage in a defense that puts a pretty high premium on it. The number 2 player we're going to be watching, Jalen Mayfield. Now, the offensive line is strong. I was listening to an interview that Phil Steele from Phil Steele's college football preview gave recently this week, and he said he talked to Josh Gaddis, Michigan's offensive coordinator, because you're not allowed to put more than 2 players from any one team on the Outland Trophy watch list, and he was tempted to put 4 Michigan offensive linemen on that list. This is going to be the best offensive line Michigan's had at least since Lloyd Carr retired, and maybe even further into the Carr era. There is a question mark, but you've already got Andrew Stuber there at the right tackle who's played a lot of meaningful minutes. Really, the only question is this young man that people are raving about athletically, is he able to take the next step and grab hold of that right tackle position? We shall see when camp begins. And the final player that I'll be keeping my eye on in fall camp, I mean, there's no use watching guys who are already established. So we're looking to see who are the guys ready to emerge. Cam McGrone out of Indianapolis, 24/7 Sports rated him the number 1 linebacker prospect in the entire country. In the 2018 recruiting class, he was the highest rated player in Michigan's 2018 class. I think a lot of us were surprised when we didn't see him play any meaningful snaps in the bowl game, given the new redshirt rules. But you're talking next level athleticism here. Sam Webb at the Michigan Insider says he's the closest thing to Devin Bush's package of athleticism that Michigan currently has at the linebacker position. And there's a lot of high-profile recruits there waiting their turn at Michigan, none more so, though, than Cam McGrone. Which brings us to the main storylines I'm going to be watching during the course of fall camp. Let's start with the cornerback depth. And this goes again back to the Daxton Hill story, where if Brad Hawkins can emerge there and take hold firmly of that safety position, then Daxton Hill can provide you some relief there. Ambry Thomas is working his way through something. It's not an injury, according to Coach Harbaugh, but he's lost some weight battling it and needs to put some weight back on to be cleared to play again. But let's face it, even though he's the highest rated corner recruit of the Harbaugh era, we haven't seen anything from him at the cornerback position so far at all. Now, Michigan has 13 scholarship defensive backs on the roster for Friday. 13. And one of them is a preseason All-American in Lavert Hill. I have got to believe out of those 13 players, at least 2 more guys who are functional coverage corners can be found, but we shall see over the course of fall practice. The next storyline we're going to be following during fall camp: how healthy are Nico Collins and Donovan Peoples-Jones really? We didn't see them all in the spring, or didn't see them at all in the spring. Now, with Nico Collins, I think a lot of it with him, the new phrase in the NBA these days, load management. It's not uncommon for veteran players who have proven themselves to be given some rest time in the spring and to give their bodies time to rebound. So I'm not really so much concerned about him. My interpretation of what went on with him in the spring was more of that load management variety. I'm much more concerned about Donovan Peoples-Jones. Now, hey, wide receiver might be the deepest position on this entire roster, but I don't know anybody, though, that wouldn't miss a young man with that kind of talent. And especially in an offense that is tailor-made for him to put up stupid numbers. Now, he had a soft tissue injury that didn't require any surgery, but it was really nagging him during a difficult rehab process. Our own Michael Spath, our buddy, he's going to be joining us later. I'm going to ask him about it because he's really close to that situation and give us an update on his readiness for fall camp. The number 3 story we'll be following here over the course of the month of August: Is there a bell cow in the big house? I know speed and space is all the rage, but you can't throw the ball in every down. In fact, all 4 of the teams that made the playoffs last year, none of them had a run percentage lower than 54% of their snaps, including Oklahoma. If you look at both Jim Harbaugh and Josh Gaddis's pasts as coaches, for Josh Gaddis as an assistant at Alabama and Penn State, for Jim Harbaugh as a head coach, whether it's Toby Gerhart, Frank Gore, or Karan Higdon, both these guys have always had a bell cow running back. Somebody's got to be the 4-minute guy to close out games. You don't run running backs in there like it's a 4x100 relay. All right, so you can certainly move guys around and spread the carries out, but ultimately somebody has to be the bell cow. Now, given the new offensive scheme, that player shouldn't have to carry the offense the way that Karan Higdon did a year ago. But somebody has to be the reliable alpha ultimately. And finding who that is in camp, I think, is one of the big storylines to come. Number 2 on our top 5 storylines to watch in fall camp is a really unique situation. You don't typically see this, right? So kicking battles are going to be waged all over college and pro football this month. But I don't know that I can recall a time, especially in college, where so many upsets occur in week 1 because you're just not yet sound in the kicking game without any preseason games to get you ready. Michigan has a unique situation where you had 2 guys with pretty bionic legs in Jake Moody and Quinn Nordine who have proven themselves in game action. Now vying, not out of necessity, but out of depth. You don't see that a lot in college football. And, everybody wants to say, well, have Quinn Nordine just be the long kicker guy. And I don't know that Jake Moody has that kind of leg, because Nordine may have the strongest leg of anybody I've ever seen at Michigan. But, Jake Moody was the kickoff specialist, ladies and gentlemen. It ain't like a 48-yard field goal is a Herculean task to him. So I could see this being a competition that just never ends. It just goes on through the season, and whoever has the hot hand and has established themselves at that time is who Harbaugh goes with. A lot of teams right now in college football are feeling fortunate that they can find one reliable kicker. Michigan's going to go into camp with 2 to do battle. It'll be fascinating to watch that. And the number 1 storyline we'll be watching, the thing you don't want to think about, the undiscovered country, a little Shakespeare reference there. The big injury, the thing that you didn't see coming, the Drew Henson breaking his foot when you had an offense with all 5 offensive linemen in 2000 that played in the NFL. A future NFL Rookie of the Year at running back, 2 NFL receivers as well. As NFL tight ends. It was all set up for Michigan to have an incredible offense in 2000. And then Drew Henson breaks his foot, and the Wolverines got to go with a redshirt freshman who's unproven named John Navarre, and they lose that game early in the year against UCLA. So those are the things that you just can't forecast, you don't see coming, and those are this is the time of year. It's said during the off season, you just no news is Gary news. If you remember the great Space Coaster from back in the day, you don't really want to see your team in the news in April, May, and June after spring practice, because it's usually not for anything good. This is now the time of year you don't want any surprises. Okay, yeah, you anything that you didn't see coming at all is typically bad news this time of year. So we want to stay away from that undiscovered country. When we come back, Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor and Wolverine Digest, he'll give his take on what he's looking for as fall camp gets underway here in a couple of days. Next. Now that football season is here, it's a great time to support Michigan Podcast via Patreon. We'd love to get over 100 patrons on Patreon by the time the season kicks off on August the 31st. And there's 3 ways that you can support us on Patreon. If you pledge $1 a month, that's just a great way, if you like our content, just to say thank you for putting this together for you all across the maize and blue landscape all year long. If you are in our exclusive club for $5 or more per month, then you get exclusive content. Like you can see, I recently posted my bestest bets for the college football season win totals in 2019. We will also have exclusive instant reaction podcast after games and other content that we set aside, like my point spread picks and others that we do for those of you that are supporting us at $5 a month. And then if you'd like to join our booster club, that's $25 or more a month. You also get your name and business mentioned in the credits, a shout out in the show as well. So a way to promote any message that you have, with some standards around here, obviously, or a business that you'd like us to promote for you as well, for just being a booster for $25 or more per month. And thank you to all of you that have been supporting us all year long as we head into our third season on Michigan Podcast. Let's continue our look at fall camp beginning for the Wolverines on Friday with Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor, as well as WolverineDigest.com. Michael, it's good to have you back with us here on Michigan Podcast. And let's start with kind of getting your 10,000-foot view of your overall assessment of where things with the team stand as fall camp gets underway on Friday.
Well, it's funny you say that because I'm in Holland, Michigan right now with my family, and there is a mountain here that we climb to check out the sunset. I don't think it's 10,000 feet, but I do think it's about 1,000 feet up there. So where I'm sitting at is this is a great opportunity for Michigan football this year. Ryan Day has taken over for Urban Meyer. One of the best coaches in college football history has been removed from the equation. Jim Harbaugh, when you look at the exception maybe of Brian Kelly, who is very much, has been a up and down roller coaster type coach in Notre Dame. I don't think any of us would sit here and say that Jim Harbaugh is not the better coach in every matchup that he goes into this season. In addition to having the best coach in all 12 games, he certainly seems to have the best talent in at least 11 of those 12 games, with Ohio State being potentially the one exception. But here's the difference. Ohio State has an unproven first-year quarterback in Justin Fields. Meanwhile, Michigan is returning Shea Patterson as a senior after guiding the Wolverines in all 13 games last year. They've got an experienced offensive line with three seniors on that offensive line. They've got a senior tight end. They've got, experienced some of the best wide receiver talent that I can ever recall at the University of Michigan. I think this trio that they have with Nico Collins, Tariq Black, and Don Peoples-Jones is equal to or better than the Braylon Edwards, Jason Avant, Steve Breston trio of 2003, 2004. So offensively, they have as much talent as we've seen in a really long time, probably since the 2007 season with Henny Hart, Manningham, and Arrington. Defensively, they lost a lot, but they lost a lot of guys with the exception of Devin Bush and a couple other characters too. We had some underachievers. Rashawn Gary was a big-time underachiever. Can they perform better than he was a year ago? I hope so. Safety position, Tyreek Kennell was an underachiever. So when they get more out of that position, they should feel really good about things. So you've got Don Brown. He's pissed off because he got embarrassed by Ohio State. They put 62 points on him, the most in program history, something that absolutely should not happen in the game. So there's a lot to like about this season. I'm honestly super excited. I know we say that every single year. I know we say the expectations are really high, but this is it. This is it. One way or another, we're going to know everything that we need to about Jim Harbaugh and the Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. If he doesn't get it done this year, I don't think he's going to get it done, folks. And if he does get it done this year, then we're talking about a new era of Michigan football.
Who are some of the players? I open up the show talking about players and storylines that I'm going to be tracking during fall camp. We'll get to the storylines you'll be looking at here in a moment, but give us some of the players that you're going to be watching for in camp and why.
Let's start with defensively. So there's a couple of spots. One, pretty much at every level, right? At the cornerback position, they lost David Long, a third-round pick, a guy who was incredibly solid last year, really kind of underrated. We didn't talk about him a whole lot. We didn't talk about him like Woodson. We didn't talk about him like Marlon Jackson. We didn't even talk about him like Jordan Lewis. And yet you look at the numbers that he put up, the passer rating against, the completion percentage against. This was as elite as it gets. So looking for his replacement, is it Vincent Gray? Now that Ambry Thomas is out for a little bit, is it another young guy? Who is the guy that takes over for David Long opposite Lavert Hill? Then at the linebacker spot, Devin Bush is gone. Devin Bush, arguably, in my lifetime, David Harris has always been the quintessential best middle linebacker I've ever seen. Devin Bush gives him every bit of a run for his money. It's you want to pick between those two guys for me. It's David Harris, Devin Bush, 1A, 1B, whichever way you want to go. So Josh Ross, who's replacing him? Cam McGrone, Jordan Anthony. So I'm going to keep my eye on those guys. And then the defensive line position, I'm not even that interested, actually, in defensive end with Aiden Hutchinson and Kwity Paye, because I think those guys are both going to have a good season. To me, The interior of the defensive line, how healthy is Michael Dwumfor? Can Carlo Kemp step up? Donovan Jeter had a great spring, but there's been a lot of guys in the history of Michigan football who've had a great spring and then it kind of fizzled out once we got to the season. How about the youngsters, the two freshmen, Mozzie Smith and Chris Hinton? They're going to need one of those guys to be in the two deep and play some significant minutes. So at each level, that's what I'm keeping my eye on. On the offensive side of the ball, this whole quasi idea of playing Shea Patterson and Dylan McCaffrey in the same game, I'm really curious by. And then I think everybody has their eyes on the running back position. Is it Zach Charbonnet? Is it Christian Turner? Is it True Wilson? Michigan has a pretty good history with walk-ons. You go back and look, and people underrated Jordan Kovacs for his sophomore year and his junior year, and all of a sudden as a senior year, and you're kind of like, yeah, Jordan Kovacs is legit. And I wonder if we're going to get that feeling about True Wilson this year. So who's the running back, and then who's the right tackle? Those are all the spots that I'm keeping my eye on, and it should be an interesting camp because there's enough positions that are going to be competed at that we should have some fun kind of dissecting who is this guy, who is that guy. And yet it's not an overwhelming number where we're panicked about it going into fall camp.
Talking with Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor and WolverineDigest.com here on Michigan Podcast, looking ahead to fall camp opening up for the Wolverines later this week. You mentioned some specific players. I'm surprised you didn't mention Daxton Hill. Given safety is kind of, especially in a scheme like Don Brown's, that it demands a lot of coverage from all levels in the defensive backfield, and you may need him to play a nickel, a slot, some spot duty at corner, given his speed and given the Ambry Thomas situation. How come you didn't bring him up? Just out of curiosity.
You know why I didn't bring Daxton Hill up? Because I am probably one of the most cautious when it comes to true freshmen that there is. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to have an early enrollee like a Zach Charbonnet. At the same time, even then, we've seen a number of guys enroll early, Marvin Robinson in the past, and Vladimir Emelian, who was really hyped up, and Will Campbell was hyped up, and all these guys that were hyped up because they enrolled early, and then we got to the fall, and they still didn't play very much. And so I don't get too excited about true freshmen because there's such a huge learning curve still. And so until I see him go out there for the first 4 games of the year and really bring it, until we see him play a legit quarterback, which is not until week 5 against Iowa, I don't know what we're going to get from Daxton Hill this year. I would love to say he's going to be the answer to all of Michigan's questions at the safety position. But I think more likely than not, I always look to the guys that are returning in their 3rd or 4th year, someone like Brad Hawkins, someone like Jamerick Woods. If those two guys are not really good players this year for Michigan, and they really do have to go to Daxton Hill, a true freshman, to be the starting safety, I think that's a troubling sign for Michigan football. One more player I mentioned that you did not, Jalen Mayfield at tackle. Your thoughts on him? Yeah, I mean, he's someone that was very excited about in the spring. They had a lot of talk about him in fall camp last year as a true freshman. I think he played in less than 4 games, but he played in enough of them to get some experience, but not enough to burn his red shirt. I mean, there are certain guys who people talk about, people get excited about because they're recruiting, people get excited about because, hey, he's a redshirt freshman this year. Steve, I mean, you know me well enough now. I'm really one of those I need to see it to believe it type of folks. What have I seen in Jalen Mayfield so far? He was an undersized offensive tackle from Grand Rapids. He played in 2 games last year. I saw him briefly, maybe for about 18 to 20 plays in a spring game. I haven't seen him do anything. I haven't seen him go up against Chase Young. I haven't seen him go up against Grass Matos from Penn State. I haven't seen him go up against A.J. Epineza from Iowa. Until I see those things, and really the first example we're going to get is maybe Army. They've got a couple of good defensive linemen, or more likely Wisconsin with their reputation. I think that's the first time that I'm going to know anything about Jalen Mayfield. Fair enough. Let's look at the storylines that you're going to be following on your show throughout fall camp. What are they? Yeah, I mean, I think a big one, obviously the starting positions, the starting jobs are up for grabs, whether or not the running back is a liability this year. But, I want to know how Michigan, replaces some key components in that front 7 defensively. We mentioned Rashawn Gary, and I didn't mention Chase Winovich, who was the best defensive lineman on that team a year ago, and Devin Bush. I mean, those are three mainstays in your front seven. So honestly, I don't know there's a ton that we can watch in fall camp. There's going to be some position battles that are decided. But I think this really gets interesting once we get into the season, once we get to the Army game, once we get to week 3, which is, the third game, the fourth week against Wisconsin. I mean, I've been susceptible. I know you have been too, Steve, and I know that Michigan fans have been, to like buying into things in fall camp and saying like this guy's going to be great or that guy's going to be great, and then coming out and laying an egg against Utah, coming out and laying an egg against Notre Dame, getting beat pretty early in the season, their first major matchup in 2017 against Michigan State. So I'm going to listen. I'm curious to see who wins the starting jobs, but other than that, like I'm not getting really too involved in storylines or this or that. I want to see it in-game action before I get too excited about this Michigan football team.
All right, then let me have you get your thoughts on some of the things I've already highlighted. There's a lot of talk about the cornerback depth, and I understand why, but they have 13 scholarship defensive backs on the roster. 13. I have got to believe if they have full motor function in the ability to evaluate tape and talent, that you can, especially when one of them is already a returning preseason All-American, you can find 3 decent cover guys out of 13 scholarship defensive backs, Michael.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. I mean, hell, last year they played essentially with 5 guys, right? They played with Brandon Watson in the nickel. They played with Tyreek Kinnell. They played with Josh Metellus in the 2 safety spots. They played with Lavert Hill, and they played with David Long at the 2 cornerback spots. How often do we see Jalen Kelly Powell? How often do we see Jamerick Woods? How often do we see Brad Hawkins? We didn't see these guys very much. So as long as, and that's a position where there's not a ton of injuries in the defensive backfield. So as long as those guys stay healthy, I'm pretty confident that they'll be able to field. And this has been a spot, especially cornerback, where they have Mike Zordich has done a tremendous job. There might not be a better position coach on this Michigan football team consistently than Mike Zordich. So that's not a position that really worries me. And all these people that are upset about Ambry Thomas not being ready to go by the start of the season.
What has he done?
He's not one of those guys. What has he done? I haven't seen anything from Ambry Thomas yet. I mean, this is supposed to be a guy who is a potential answer for Michigan. And in the Ohio State games, Brandon Watson is getting blown off the ball by speed and has no confidence in the game. These coaches don't feel capable of putting Ambry Thomas in the game. Right. So why am I getting bent out of shape that he's not available for the start of fall camp? Those are things to me where I think people, tend to, fans, some people in the media tend to project a lot. I don't love projecting. I want to see it to believe it instead of saying like, well, this is the way that it's going to be. I don't know anything about Ambry Thomas. I've never seen Ambry Thomas play. So I have no idea if that's a loss for Michigan. Pardon me. Nico Collins and Donovan Peoples-Jones were both banged up in the spring. With Nico, it kind of seemed like more load management coming off of rigorous season and a proven veteran player. You know what you're going to get, and you give him time to heal. With DPJ, you were all over this story, something that could linger well into the season, Harbaugh said. Where is he at right now? What have you heard? What I've heard is that he got some good treatment, that they had a plan in place, and that, Josh Gaddis about a month ago said that he's 100% and going full bore and he's doing great. I think that was a little premature. It sounds like he's not quite 100%, but that they feel going into the season that he's going to be as good as he's going to be. They're not going to ask him to. I think the one difference is because of the way that this offense is structured, they don't need a number 1 guy to go out there and catch 15 balls a game. They don't need him to run 60 routes a game. They're going to ask him to run 35 to 40 routes and catch 4 to 7 balls a game. And it sounds like he'll be able to do that. I think what's going to be interesting is that it sounds to me that he's going to be limited in practice. And the good news is that he's a junior coming back. The bad news is that he's breaking himself into a new offense. And so I just would expect Nico, I would expect Tariq Black, I would expect Mike Sainristil, I would expect Ronnie Bell to, in some ways, be guys that get more targets than Donovan Peoples-Jones, but Donovan Peoples-Jones still to be a major target when they need him. Let's go to the backfield. And I understand the speed and space thing. Last year, having Wisconsin, which had a disastrous quarterback situation,
throwing the ball more than Michigan. You and I've had all those conversations in the offseason. But we can't swing the pendulum so far the other way that, Michigan just doesn't have to run the ball. That's not how this works. And if you go to the offenses that both Jim Harbaugh and Josh Gaddis have always been a part of, Harbaugh's always had a bell cow, whether it was Toby Gerhart, whether it was Frank Gore, whether it was Karan Higdon last year. And Josh Gaddis has had the same thing everywhere he's been as well, both at Alabama, Penn State. So somebody has to be the 4-minute offense guy. You don't shuffle in running backs, like it's a 4x100 relay, So you can have depth, but somebody has to be the bell cow. Do you think they've got a bell cow in the big house, or do we have to learn that?
Yeah, I would be betraying myself and everything I've said so far in the first 20 minutes of our conversation if I said, oh, yeah, this guy is going to be the guy, because what if, none of us have ever seen Zach Charbonnet. People that want to project again from his high school film, high school. Okay. Even if he played in the great league in California, how many of those guys, he's going against 11 guys, every defense. So he's going against, about 10 to 13 teams a year, 11 guys. We're talking about 130 guys. How many of those 130 guys are going to play Division I that are going to be, starters for their football team? Mm-hmm. Probably less than 25%. Even in a really good league like California. Now
that said though, his film looks the way it's supposed to look when you're playing competition like that, right? The film is pretty filthy. Yeah,
I'm totally good with that.
Yeah,
but can I sit here and say that he's going to go out there and pull a Anthony Thomas, 1997 season, a Chris Perry 2000 and yikes? So what would it have been? 2000, I guess.
2000.
He's going to go.
Yeah,
out
when
there.
he had to come in. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, am I going to say that he's going to go out there and rush for 600, 700, 800 yards? No, I'm not going to make that type of projection. I think the safest bet among these running backs is True Wilson, and True Wilson was a guy who you can count on to block for the passer, to be a good bodyguard. But we saw a guy who got most of his carries in the third and fourth quarters of games. So what do we know of True Wilson? We know that he's dependable in the pass protection. And we'll see what he can do in the running game. I don't know anything about these running backs. I don't think anybody does. I don't even think these coaches are going to spend a lot of time with them the next 3-4 weeks getting them ready. But they're going to go up against Middle Tennessee in an opener at night, under the lights at the big house. And they're all going to be waiting with bated breath to see which one of these guys actually delivers on the goods here.
Final thing I want to ask you about is Michigan has a unique situation with a kicking battle. Because 99.999% of the time you have a kicking battle in camp. It's because you don't have anybody reliable. You're breaking new guys in, and you're trying to see who can handle the pressure. In Michigan's case, they've got two guys who have bionic legs, who have made some big kicks. Jake Moody was a revelation down the stretch last year when Quinn Nordin got hurt. Quinn Nordin's very first game in college, he set the Michigan record for most 50-yard field goals in a game. All right, so this is going to be something you don't see all the time with two guys with terrific legs who have proven it in game action, going head-to-head at kicker. Can you ever recall a situation like that? Because I can't.
Wow, that's a good question. Huh. Wow. Not really. Where you had two kickers that were both viable. I have to go back and look at like the Jay Feely era and the Hayden Epstein era and the, didn't Hayden Epstein and Adam Finley overlap a little bit?
Maybe a little. But this would be a perfect situation guys, if we have like a trade deadline in college football, and it's a little bit like the Tigers trading a closer. If somebody needs a kicker and you're like, we'll take your number 2 running back off of you for one of these kickers. That'd be a great situation, right?
Who does Wisconsin need a kicker? Could we give them a kicker?
Because they've got like 5 running backs, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Jonathan Taylor could get hurt, and the guy would rush for like 1,500 yards. I can't recall a situation like this. I really can't. It's pretty unique in that way. I think most fans, and at least where I'm coming from, have more confidence in Jake Moody because he's not. This is kind of pun intended, I guess, because he's not moody like Quinn Nordin seems to be. Quinn Nordin seems to be, the haircut that looks like Ricky Vaughn from Major League, and just he's got that mentality, that's persona. Big leg, but also inconsistent and he's, at least we've seen one verbal fight he's gotten in with Harbaugh on the sideline. So I would go with Moody to start. but I would put, Quinn Nordine in the game when you need to kick a 50-yarder. And if the kid could deliver, then I guess you've got a great problem to have because you can rely on both guys. But this is a good situation. I was told that Brad Robbins, the scholarship punter, Will Hart is the guy who knocked it out of the park a year ago, but the Brad Robbins has looked really good in some of the summer camps. So it's a situation where they could go into fall camp here this week with 2 proven kickers and 2 punters. And so then they really need to make some type of trade. Let's go get AJ Epinesa from Iowa. They grow defensive linemen there, or go to Ohio State, and let's just take Justin Fields off their team so they have no chance to do anything.
Yeah, this is going to be one of the best special team units, and they've been fairly strong. Of course, you have the mishap against Michigan State his first year, but special teams have been a strength, holistically in the Harbaugh era. But this is going to be, you throw in the guys they have in the return game and the various athletes there. Michigan's always good for a kick block or 2 in a given year since Harbaugh's been there. This is going to be one of the best special team units in the country, I think.
Yeah, it really should be. It really should be. When you got Don Peoples-Jones and you've got Ronnie Bell and you've got Mike Sainristil and all these guys that can return kicks, and they've been pretty good at covering the kicks too. So it really should be good. Speaking of the Michigan State kick, and I don't mean to end on like a poor note, but coming up on Inside the Huddle sometime in the next 2 weeks, we have a special teams coach who's going to be joining us who kicked in college at LSU, and he has diagnosed that Michigan State play. And the person to blame is very surprising, and I will give you a hint: it's not Jim Harbaugh or Blake O'Neill.
So that's got to be like a violation of a Geneva Convention for torture, repetition for your audience there, right?
I get it. Yeah, I know. It's just he wanted to come on
and the next day, Michael's going to break down all of Ohio State's touchdowns in the 62-39 game back in November, just to get you ready for the season.
We're going to go back to 4th down and 1, 2016.
Yes,
we're going to show you
on
every
loop
camera angle.
Yes,
we're going to show you every cell phone camera angle from the stadium. And talk about why it was inconclusive.
And that'll be one whole show on a Friday while Michael bucks out early, and they'll split the screen up. You'll get to see that play on loop from various angles, and on the other side of the screen, you'll be screaming when you watch those infamous photos of the officiating crew slapping Ohio State players on the ass, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I want my wife to look at me, Michael, the way that referee looked at Curtis Samuel when he scored the winning touchdown. I want my wife to look at me like that.
Oh man. Yeah, I understand. I get it. Oh, boy, too funny. Yeah, so we ended on a positive note here today. So good luck with your audience the rest of the way.
I will clean up the mess after you're gone, man. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. Take care.
Okay, thank you, guys.
All right, see ya. Hey, if you want to keep up with what we think about Michigan athletics all week long in between episodes of Michigan Podcast, check out our website at wolverinedigest.com. For example, we've got a brand new story up there looking at all of the potential starting 5s in the Big Ten now that Franz Wagner's in the fold for the Wolverines, and you can see where Michigan stacks up against the rest of the conference. There's ways to keep up with our coverage of the football team, basketball. We've added hockey and baseball as well. So a ton of stuff that you can follow along with here. And we have a video each and every morning we put up as a way of just saying kind of good morning and catching you up on whatever the big news was from overnight for the Michigan Wolverines. So you can follow us on the website, Recruiting 2, at wolverinedigest.com. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, who's most likely to be the most pleasant surprise of fall camp? Cornerback Vincent Gray, linebacker Jordan Anthony, offensive tackle Jalen Mayfield, and newly minted defensive tackle, artist formerly known as fullback, Ben Bench Mason. And by a pretty sizable amount, double digits in fact, Jalen Mayfield, the new emerging redshirt freshman at right tackle here, competing with Andrew Stuber, was your choice. Which brings us to this week's question of the week, which comes from Radis, who wants to know if Jim Harbaugh loses to Ohio State this year, is it time to part ways with him? Well, this is one of the most fascinating. Let's say that happens. And And then let's say after cutting myself several times, I'm able to talk about it afterwards. This would be one of the most damned peculiar things we've ever seen. Because, in fact, you'd be getting into John Cooper territory at Ohio State, where the guy won like 82% of his games against everybody other than Michigan. So that's exactly what Jim Harbaugh has done. I mean, he's won 82% of his games at Michigan against everybody other than Urban Meyer. And now, this is his fifth go around against the Buckeyes, and Urban Meyer is gone, so it's versus Ryan Day. Michigan's not. Let's say Michigan goes 10-2, and one of the losses is to Ohio State. Michigan is not going to fire a coach who would then have a 48-16 record. Right? They're not going to fire a coach who has a 48-16 record, almost under any circumstance. Number one. Then you throw in no scandal, high APR. And oh, by the way, he's one of the most popular living players in your illustrious program's history. The guy was third in the Heisman Trophy balloting. So no is the answer. However, I don't know what happens to how many more times you get to come up with a reason why this occurred again. Okay, well, Ohio State had the recruiting edge. Okay, you've now had 5 years to recruit. Ohio State had Urban Meyer. Well, he's gone. Well, Ohio State, had the superior offensive scheme. Well, Michigan's modernized on that end. I mean, Michigan continues to recruit at a very high level, but you need a narrative to continue to recruit at that high a level. And I don't know what happens, what the new narrative is if you lose 5 in a row. You switch the offense. You're not going to switch the defense. I mean, you think Don Brown's the best coach you've ever coached with. You're not going to switch yourself. I mean, Ohio State switched coaches. So, I mean, I understand. I don't think you have to be a hater to ask this. Because, I mean, on one hand, yes, Michigan isn't, nor should it, fire a coach who would then, in that scenario, be 48-16. Shouldn't. It's a ridiculous thought. But it's not a ridiculous thought if the context to asking this question is, how many more times can you go back to the well before you live by the narrative and you die by the narrative? And then that next layer of recruits you need to land to stay a top 10 program start going somewhere else where they think the trajectory is pointed higher. So here's my answer. I don't want to even have to ask that question this November. I think that's the best answer. Let's not find out. In fact, I think that's the best course of action for all involved. Thanks to all of you for watching and listening here to another episode of Michigan Podcast. Remember, whether it's YouTube or iTunes, Google Play, however you watch or listen, like, subscribe, 5-star review accordingly, please. The more of those we get, the more the algorithms who run our lives now smile favorably upon thee and help us to spread the word about what we're doing here, which you can do as well, sharing with your fellow Michigan fans across the country. Want to thank our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast as well for helping to get the word out about this. You can follow us all week long on Twitter at Michigan Podcast and get everything we're thinking as well each day at WolverineDigest.com. Until next week, go Blue.